Sarada's Mangekyo Sharingan is one of the most mysterious aspects of Boruto's manga. The absence of what is likely the most powerful weapon in Sarada's arsenal, even in the face of enemies worthy of said power, does indeed beg the question. What happened to Sarada's Mangekyo Sharingan? Did she lose it, or does she believe that she doesn't need it? Well, the answer is actually neither, because the real reason why Sarada doesn't use the Mangekyo is because she doesn't know that she awakened it, and of course, I can prove it. You see, there is precedence for this happening in the Naruto franchise in multiple instances. The first one we're gonna cover is the mystery behind when Obito actually awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan. Now this one is particularly interesting because it was shown to us in chapter 605 that Obito awakened his Mangekyo upon seeing Rin die, which made perfect sense since the Mangekyo is mostly awakened due to emotional distress. So for the most part, it seems pretty clear-cut that this was indeed the moment when the eye was awakened. But that's when Madara comes in. You see, after Obito gave his left eye to Kakashi and the rest of the structure caved in, he didn't actually die. I mean, clearly since we all read the story, but the main point is that Madara was the one who saved him. He then brought him back to his hideout where he patched him up with Hashirama cells, thus restoring his lost limbs and organs. So when Obito eventually woke up, half of his body was in bandages, while the other half was mostly fine. Now this is all relevant because Madara then goes on to say that Obito surviving what happened could be called miraculous. It's incredible that he wasn't completely crushed by those boulders. It's almost as if he passed right through them. He then went on to point out that only half of his body was mostly pulverized, which is of course referring to the right side of his body that the rock initially fell on. Now, as you guys know, Obito's Mangekyo ability is known as Kamui, which has a function that allows him to phase through objects by projecting portions of his body to the Kamui dimension. So yeah, the logic behind it is pretty wonky in some sense, but he's pretty much existing in two spaces at the same time, which allows him to decide which space has his physical body at any given time. That explains why Kakashi could attack the physical portions of his body that resided in the Kamui dimension while he phased through Naruto's attacks that existed in the original time space. So when Madara said that it seemed as if Obito phased through the boulders, this is what it was referring to, which then implies that Obito actually unknowingly first awakened his Mangekyo during what he thought was his last moment, not when he saw Rin die. That was just a reawakening. Now I know that one of the main arguments against this would be that if he awakened the Mangekyo ability to pass through objects in that moment, why was he damaged? Well, the answer to this is actually quite simple. You see, to understand what Madara meant when he said that it was almost as if he passed right through them, you have to understand the full context of what happened. There's this big misconception that Obito was just crushed by a single rock, when the truth is that the entire structure caved in, which under any normal circumstance would have crushed his entire body. So if a single rock falling on him crushed the right side of his body to the point where he couldn't even feel it anymore, how did he survive the weight of multiple boulders falling onto him later on? Well, of course, it goes back to Madara's hypothesis that it's almost as if Obito phased right through them, which for one serves to foreshadow his future Mangekyo ability and also explains how he survived. Oh, and by the way, Kamui is stated to be autonomous, so Obito doesn't have to manually activate it, which means that he doesn't need to be aware of it in order to use it. So the logic does track, and it's the main reason why this statement exists in the first place. Now this then takes us back to Sarada, who similar to Obito awakened her Mangekyo Sharingan due to emotional distress when the entire world turned against her friend, that being Boruto. So her need to protect or save him released that special chakra, which then triggered the Mangekyo. Now of course, this doesn't mean that she's aware of the fact that this happened because she was under emotional distress. So Sasuke is the only one who actually saw the Mangekyo patterns in her eyes, which he didn't comment on publicly, at least not on panel. So the argument could be made that the reason why Sarada hasn't used the Mangekyo Sharingan in Two Blue Vortex is because she doesn't know that she awakened it, which also likely means that she will awaken once again, similar to Obito. By the way, the concept of reawakenings as it relates to the Sharingan isn't anything new. I mean, Sarada herself already underwent this process with her normal Sharingan. This was confirmed by Sakura, who said that she actually unknowingly awakened her Sharingan at a very young age, perhaps due to Sasuke's absence. So when she triggered it on her way to meet Sasuke years later, that was actually a reawakening. That is why I believe that similar to how the initial reasoning for awakening the Mangekyo was to protect Boruto, that will also be the reason for the reawakening again in the upcoming chapters. Now Sarada and Obito aren't the only ones who underwent this reawakening process. This actually happened to Sasuke as well because it was initially initially believed that he awakened his Sharingan during his fight with Haku back in part 1, mainly because the story made it seem that way through the dialogue and visuals. So it's not like we were making unfounded assumptions, but it was later revealed that he actually unknowingly awakened his Sharingan the same night Itachi forced him to watch his parents die a billion times over. So similar to Sarada, who had an initial awakening at a younger age, then had a reawakening later on in the timeline, the same happened to her father Sasuke. Then you add the evidence supporting Obito's true Mangekyo awakening, and you now have all the precedents you need to support the theory. Now, what's more interesting is what Sarada's Mangekyo abilities will be. And yes, that's abilities, which means more than one because, you know, Mangekyo users possess 2 abilities. I mean, there's no way to truly know what's going to happen, but Noxtaku made an interesting video a few years ago explaining that there's actually a mechanic behind which Mangekyo abilities are chosen, or let's say developed. In essence, the Mangekyo abilities are determined by the personal or life experience of the user. So in Itachi's case, one of his Mangekyo ability is Tsukiyomi. This is an ability that puts his target in a dreamlike state where they experience a secluded hell state in their mind, when in actuality it's all just a lie. Just as Itachi went through the pain of killing his entire clan, and despite doing it for the greater good, he was instead regarded as a villain. This then became his reality after he snuck into the Akatsuki, suffering through life as a villain living a lie, when in actuality he wasn't. Then there's Amaterasu, which is an eternal black flame that consumes everything, even fire itself for some reason. Nox then draws a comparison to the will of fire, which here is then described as the will to protect the Leaf Village. So Itachi, who went to the extent of sacrificing his own clan for the sake of said village, then awakened an ever-burning fire in the form of Amaterasu. Now Sasuke, on the other hand, also possesses the Amaterasu due to the burning anger he carried with him his entire life, until Itachi's death of course, only to discover that his anger was misplaced all along. So the ability of Sasuke's other Mangekyo came in the form of Inferno-style flame control, which then allowed him to control his flames, thus being able to direct them at those he deemed truly responsible, such as the village he once vowed to destroy. Now Shin Uchiha was experimented upon and was created to literally be a weapon. That was his entire existence. He then viewed shinobi themselves as just weapons that exist to be manipulated, even his own clones. So his Mangekyo ability allowed him to manipulate weapons, which is as direct as you can be, okay? You also have Shisui Uchiha, who everyone thought was Shin Uchiha for some reason, but that's besides the point. His Mangekyo ability manifested in the form of Koto Amatsu Kami, which is pretty much an overpowered genjutsu ability that allows the user to enter the minds of others and manipulate them. It's also undetectable, like the person affected will never know, which made it particularly useful against the Uchiha who Shisui planned on subduing using this ability. You see, just like Itachi, Shisui planned on stopping the coup that the Uchiha were planning using Koto Amatsu Kami, because it was just not in the best interest of a village to have that occur at that point in time. So one can assume that he likely had that goal before manifesting this ability, and tried to persuade them, but to no avail. So his Mangekyo ability manifested Koto Amatsu Kami, which allowed him to do just that. Now I didn't mention this before, but the same applies to Obito and Kakashi. You see, the Kami ability also manifested in multiple ways. First, by allowing Obito to escape damage by transporting aspects of his body to another dimension. Or to simply put it, the ability allows him to phase through anything. Now this likely manifested due to his desire to survive when the rocks came tumbling down in that cave, which again goes back to Madara saying that it was almost as if Obito passed right through them. Now the second ability allowed him to teleport between locations using the Kami dimension as a conduit. So it's pretty much a transportation jutsu. Now I personally believe that this manifested due to Obito always being late, and that's because he was always stopping to help others, as shown in his backstory. So an ability to move from location to location in seconds because he had trouble being on time. Crazy, right? But yeah, Kakashi on the other hand awakened a long distance version of Kamui, which allowed him to teleport anything in his line of sight to the Kami dimension. This, as pointed out by Noxtaku, was likely because Kakashi watched everyone he cared about disappear. His father, Obito, Rin, and his sensei, the 4th Hokage, all of which he blamed himself for. So his Mangekyo then manifested the ability for him to make things disappear for that reason. So as you can see guys, the logic tracks for everyone, so I don't see why it would be different for Sarada. The real question is, what does Sarada desire? What fundamental life experience or challenge do you think would manifest Sarada's Mangekyo ability? Well, I think it goes back to Sasuke, or at least their relationship with him. You see, even though they somewhat or technically resolved this storyline about her relationship with Sasuke and him not being around, more so in the anime at least, there have been some hints towards this still being an issue for Sarada to some extent. And before you guys start going crazy, hear me out for a second, okay? This happened around chapter 68 after Boruto was revived by Momoshiki, and he was having a conversation with Sasuke on the balcony across from Sarada and Mitsuki. She seemed very annoyed by this and went on to say that Sasuke has forgotten that he's her father first, even more so than Boruto's teacher. This of course goes back to her initial complaints earlier on in the story, where she was once again annoyed at Sasuke not spending enough time with her, and instead choosing to train Boruto or go on missions. This was somewhat later rectified by Sasuke mainly in the anime, where he trained her for a bit and even went to father-daughter day, okay? Like, it was pretty cool. But a couple of arcs later we still see that this sentiment still somewhat lingers. Now I'm not saying that she's malicious or that she hates Boruto, but more so that she wants to spend more time with her dad like any other child would, right? And make up for the decade they lost, because Sasuke wasn't around for a very long time. That is why I believe that her Mangekyo ability will be time manipulation, which stems from her wanting to make up for lost time. This of course could be similar to the filler Mangekyo ability that Madara possessed, which allowed him to record and rewind time a few seconds back, of course with his knowledge of the future intact, thus being able to make different decisions if he didn't like the outcome. That would be a great ability for Sarada in the battle against the Shinju and any other threat that scales above them. Now there are many ways to handle time manipulation, so it might be something even crazier than that, or even something less broken. Either way, I think the logic tracks, so that will most likely be the case. Now I'm not saying that Amaterasu, because I know that's very popular. I know it's very popular with the Boruto fans and so on, and that's nice. But I'm not saying that it's completely useless, although it is somewhat loosened or somewhat there, okay? But it isn't completely useless. It does have its place against the lower tier characters who can't absorb jutsu, but that likely means that these are characters that are barely relevant to the power system within Boruto, so I can't see how that would help Sarada in any way. And normally when a character gets a power up of this magnitude, with Mangekyo specifically being the natural peak of any Uchiha not modified into oblivion, that power should mean something and should challenge the current power structure in a meaningful way. That is why in prior videos before coming to this conclusion on time manipulation, I did do some digging and I found this interesting character called Amano Zako, the daughter of Susanoo, the storm god himself, known as the goddess of rebellion. The most important ability she possessed is the heavenly counter skill, which is basically a dark type counter whenever she's hit with a physical attack. In the actual game itself where she's featured, this ability is shown as her just countering any attack done towards her with a dark energy attack that also deals damage. Naturally, this doesn't mean that if this was Sarada's main Mangekyo ability, she would receive an exact replica of this, right? That was never the case for the other Mangekyo abilities derived from the other gods, so I don't see why that would be the case here either. How I see it is that her second Mangekyo ability could be something similar to full counter used by Meliodas in 7 Deadly Sins, which enables its user to reflect attacks aimed at them back at their enemies, but with more than double the power. Therefore, the stronger the opponent's powers are, the stronger the user's power becomes. Now this does sound absolutely broken, and that's because it is. And it likely won't happen, but I'm just like referencing characters that could play a part in the story, because Kishimoto tends to take from these stories to create abilities for his characters and also just create characters in general, right? And this character or entity being the daughter of the storm god Susanoo, and also being the goddess of rebellion, and we know Sarada is in her current rebellion stage, I think it tracks somewhat, but of course, I could be reaching here. I'm also leaning towards Sarada having the time manipulation powers and maybe some ability to change destiny, if you guys believe that she did indeed change destiny, or that Sasuke just chose to believe her because he saw the Mangekyo, which made him understand that she's 100% serious about what she's saying. Either way guys, let me know your thoughts on the video down below. Do you think that Sarada will get the time manipulation? Do you have any idea what the ability will be if not time manipulation? And also guys, explain why in the comments and give me your rationale for why you gave your answer, and also why you disagree with anything I say in the video so we can have a proper conversation. With that said again guys, drop a like if you like the video, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.